Hi, welcome to Fit Kids Conversations. I'm your host, David Jacobson. I'm here today with Dr. Aviva Ayeshmerni, a concierge pediatrician in Southern California who has a fascinating background combining athleticism and pediatrics. We'll talk all things health and fitness and related topics. Welcome, Dr. Ayeshmerni.
Hi, David. Thanks for having me here today.
It's my pleasure. And one thing I didn't mention right off the bat, and I should have, is your Ask Dr. Vivi blog, which is fascinating. So if you can start off by introducing yourself in that context and a little bit of your background in athletics and doctoring, that would be wonderful.
I'd be happy to. I actually have a similar show called Doc Talks, but I spend most of my time interviewing specialists. So I'm excited to share some of the general pediatric information that comes through my office every day. Doing concierge pediatrics, I have unlimited time with my patients, so I really grow a relationship with the children. I'm practicing in Newport Beach, Southern California, but I started out my academic career at Stanford and got my master's there as well. Ended up doing medicine at Tel Aviv University and headed back to University of California, Irvine for my residency in pediatrics. Soon after, I discovered I loved working locally and hopped between many different pediatric practices until I realized just what I wanted my own practice to look like. And I opened my private practice probably in 2018 after leaving another concierge practice. So in between all of that, I did teach for 2 years in high school. So I got to experience what the world is like outside the home for kids. And then I coached cross-country running because I did run for a short stint at Stanford. So I got to know the boys and some of the girls when we had to help with the girls coaching and learn their reality every day, trying to keep them healthy and motivated with goals towards a fit kid life.
You sent over a wonderful graphic of balanced nutrition. Can you just talk a little bit about what that image represents and how important it is to youth fitness?
Yeah, I wanted to share with all parents at every stage when your child's 1 and starting to eat and you're preparing their meal, I wanted everyone to know what a balanced plate looks like. But we have 5 main food groups, and people need to learn about them and present them to our children at every meal. Our children then learn these habits of what is a balanced plate, what is balanced portions, and what they should be eating at each meal. We can only do so much, but in this talk, I'd like to share what all we can do to prepare them to make healthy choices about their food.
Wonderful. And I think you probably have some bite-sized tips for parents and families in general about how to go about cultivating proper nutritional habits in children, if you'll drop a few of those.
Yeah, first and foremost, I'd love for everyone to consider talking to their children. I do this in my office, telling children that they need to talk nicely to themselves. First and foremost, we want to love ourselves. And who is our best friend? We are. I say that because think about how often you talk to yourself during the day. All day long, we're talking to ourselves, and are we talking nice? I hope so. That's something we need to model for our children and teach our children to do. In our head, we're having conversations. They're having the same conversation. I don't like my nose. Are they saying that to themselves or not? We don't know. You need to start asking them, are they talking nice? The best trick in my book to help children love themselves is to encourage them to be without clothes in front of the mirror. It might be in their underwear after bath time, before bath time. And I do this talk in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, at my children's school, and they barely giggle. They remember, because it comes up later, that they're supposed to look at themselves in the mirror and love themselves. They have to look at their body and be appreciative that it is a healthy body that's working for them. Having an appreciation for your body helps you work hard to live healthy and feed your body so that you're thriving. Food then becomes something necessary to be healthy rather than a chore or anxiety-provoking part of our day. So having your child stand in front of the mirror, and I think it comes a little bit easier from the pediatrician, so children think, oh, this is something I'm supposed to do. but you have them look at themselves and say one part of their body that they love. It could be their eyebrows. It could be their ear. It could be their muscles. And we have to talk positive to our kids about their bodies and how wonderful and strong their bodies are. I often go into this analogy of when we're sick and have a cold and we can't breathe. Nothing's more frustrating, and we forget how grateful we were the day before to breathe through our nose. Life is miserable for 7 days, and you weren't even thinking how wonderful life was the day before you got sick. Same thing with your body. Children have accidents. They fall from a horse. They get paralysis. They can't use their leg. I share these shocking stories with children so that they aren't unappreciative of the fact that they have a body and can walk to school and they can enjoy that walk and appreciate their body. I think in all ages, you can start all of these mental tricks to get your children aware that their body is an amazing tool for them and that it is something to be worshiped in their head and in their thoughts to themselves and in their conversation to themselves. So this is a little bit aside of our conversation, but it's so critical because there's so much image and self ego and tied emotions to food and how people look. And I'd like to separate those because we're learning more that how big someone is, their girth, may have nothing to do with how healthy they are. And that's a very important lesson because if we're talking about eating healthy, it comes down to this. You could have a disease where you have hyperphagia. That means you're eating so much. But your labs could show you are the healthiest person because you're eating the right stuff.
That's beautiful as a basis for everything that follows in a child's health journey. I love that. And I also would like to delve a little bit more into the practical from that baseline into, what happens when the child just doesn't like vegetables or doesn't like certain proteins and how parents can work with that reality.
I'm glad you brought this up because a family needs a lot of support early. If you're noticing that you have a picky eater, talk to your pediatrician because bad habits start to form quickly. Picky eating is something I try my best when the child's 4 months old to avoid by introducing a wide variety of tastes, things that are much more savory, garlic powder in some of the baby food, not limiting them to oatmeal as their first food. But let's say you're stuck and it is genetic. They're genetic. They have maybe sensory issues. With the picky eating, you have to remove the anxiety around the table and feeding because that only grows into worse eating habits. And so often you can't do this alone. You need some help. You might need to have an occupational therapist evaluate the eating. Maybe the tongue movement isn't just right and it's hard and they gag and they don't like the texture. So there's usually some medical reason for picky eating or some social environmental reason. It's not always, and I would never judge. You can never judge if you have a neighbor who's feeding their child mac and cheese every day. Do not judge. You have no idea what their reality is at home. But my talk is to try to steer people away from resorting to that because often at 2, which we want them so chubby at 2, starts to decline in their metabolism and they start to become skin and bones. That continues and healthily continues until 7. This is where lots of grandparents start to worry. They give ice cream, cookies, treats. The palate changes and these children start to expect a dessert every dinner. That's not normal or healthy if you can start them on a totally different path or retrain them that you don't do desserts every meal. As far as addressing a picky eater, this is the crux of the situation. You need to be a parent where you model and guide and are strict. So if in your family, in the full plate of 5 different food groups, vegetable comes first and always comes first, your child will finally acquiesce. It could be a bite of cucumber. It could be chew it for 3 seconds and spit it out. But this is what we do. You can make it so it's not so stressful. It can be one baby carrot. They can pick, give them some autonomy in the process. Here's 3 choices. It can be broccoli, carrot, cucumber. It can be avocado. Fry up the green beans. Fry food in olive oil and garlic and make it like French fries and tell them to try it. And they can just try. And science shows that if children who are picky try something 11 or more times, their body starts to get used to it. So by really picky eaters, I'll give them a chart. And on that chart, after the child's done 11 bites of mushroom, the rule is, and then the agreement is, they don't ever have to try that one again. Kids will agree to this. This sounds great. Mom won't be able to push this vegetable on me ever again. But by the time you get close to 10, it's no big deal. They're going to eat it. But again, everything has to be without a crazy amount of anxiety. If there's tears, just back off, right? They need to have a healthy relationship with food. But you have the opportunity to model that that's what you do. And so everyone eats their vegetables. And this is breakfast. On my blog, I have the Dr. Vivi Breakfast Challenge. There you'll see 12 different foods that are so easy to give in the morning. People don't even think about salsa. Salsa is a vegetable. So if they're doing eggs, tell them, no, here's your vegetable. Put some salsa on that. And don't hide it. Do not, at 1 to 2, when you're hiding the vegetables, that's giving an impression that they're not eating vegetables. You want them to know that they're eating vegetables and how healthy those are and good for them, and that it makes them strong. So you will have a whole bunch of opportunities to consider vegetables throughout your day. You can give a vegetable you gave at dinner, just reheat it for breakfast. There's also that warm up when they wake up and they're playing. Just cut some red peppers and put it in the playroom while they're playing. They are the most hungry when they wake up. This is your time when after you have a crazy workout, your body craves healthy food, right? You're going to eat the red pepper that's in front of you. You're going to grab that carrot. Same with your children. They're most hungry or playing at the park. Bring only healthy, whole foods. And when I say healthy foods, think about the value of something that came out of the ground and all the nutrients. If you could list it, there's probably 100,000 molecules in an apple that have use as a building block in our bodies. But when you have a processed food, you're getting maybe 20. So we want to use the whole foods, and we don't want to juice them because we lose a lot of the fiber and nutrition and prebiotic. And the body doesn't, when a body sucks food like through a straw, it's not the same as using your jaw and sending a message to your stomach that you're full. So you'll often get children who are overweight who are drinking juice or having shakes, and those are wasted calories.
It's an amazing amount of detail and specificity into parental behavior and ideas, a bunch of stuff that I certainly never thought of as a parent, and a bunch of stuff that certainly my parents never thought about in raising me. That's for you, Mom. So let's move on or back to the BMI chart that you sent. I think you mentioned when we were off screen the lack of emphasis or reduced emphasis lately in BMI as an important medical measurement, or at least how it's interpreted. Can you delve into that for a little bit?
Yeah, we're learning that, and there's many, many studies showing that the amount of sugar that goes into the body is truly the culprit for almost all disease processes. My sister, at the age of, she was not yet 30, was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and I got into a cancer program for high-risk individuals, and one of the main core classes was learning not to eat sugar and how to get your carbohydrates that stretch over the day and don't peak your blood sugar. All kids' food that are packaged, one of the ingredients is sugar. That's why you always see the movements against corn syrup and processed sugar. I honestly thought it was overkill when I was a pediatrician, and the more the more lectures I'm attending and learning, it is truly the main culprit for toxicity to the body. The way our body reacts to extra sugar causes fat cells to be deposited around organs in our middle section. That really causes detriment to those organs and then our body system. Whereas a child eating olive oil, hummus, nuts, tons of potato chips that don't have added sugar, all the foods that could be fatty without sugar. And there's plenty of studies showing that these people, their blood chemistries are wonderful, and they don't have the insulation and the fat around their inner organs that is shown to be the harbinger of bad disease in the future. So that's what we're learning. And that isn't really my focus as a pediatrician, because there is an obesity pandemic, right? And so we do need to help children learn how to eat healthy and not become obese. But I'm not worried if a child is overweight or overeating healthy foods nearly as much as I am children eating the wrong foods. So if I have a very thin child who was probably the 10th percentile on the BMI curve, but is weight and height are growing right on that 10th percentile, but the parents are giving ice cream and cookies and packaged foods and Hawaiian rolls. Nothing drives me more nuts than Hawaiian rolls. Everyone tends to put their sandwiches on that instead of whole grain, or the Quaker granola bars. There's so much sugar. Goldfish has sugar, and they're feeding these foods to the children. That child is now maybe going to go up from the 10th percentile, but in a very unhealthy way. And if they grow along the 10th percentile, they're going to be just fine. So from pretty much 6, 7 on, our BMI always gets bigger. It's human nature. So it's okay if they're skin and bones until the seventh year.
You probably understand better than most the value of certain extra nutrients in response to athletic stimulation or certain athletic goals. And certainly I'm sure that would include hydration and just different balances. So if you could talk a bit about the impact of especially kids, say 6 to 12 years old, as they start getting into sports and activities and how their nutritional needs may change.
So basically every human should be walking about 4 miles a day. Kids can do a lot more than that. So walking to and from school at all ages is a good idea. The 6 to 12 group, they're generally with school moving around quite a bit. In California here, we do put a lot of emphasis on after school sports. It's year round. The hydration couldn't be more critical, but that's for athletes and non-athletes. The movement is great because it fixes constipation on another level, but constipation is more than 50% of all pediatric patients, and that's literally due to not enough water intake. That fits into our talk because constipation begets poor eating choices, poor interest in food. You don't pick fiber-filled foods when you're feeling full and constipated. You don't eat healthy, therefore. And so it becomes a terrible cycle. But out of all the things that a person can do nutrition-wise, it's drinking water. And I would say 1 liter of water is the minimum. And that's just not me. That's what the body needs. So for athletes and appetite, you don't need to limit. You honestly want them to eat healthy foods. And for all children, you don't have to limit. When you do provide healthy foods, children naturally stop eating when they are full. So caloric needs do go up with activity, sometimes up to 1,000 calories, depending on the activity if they're a cross-country runner. We typically don't see that much activity under 12, and we don't want too much to stunt their growth because we do know that there is some effects on bone development with high intense sports. In But in any case, there should be some education as far as how many calories are needed a day by age. And I did share a graph with you that you could share that has by age group, depending on your activity, the low and the high caloric needs. I would never want a parent to measure out in front of their child what a portion is, but I do think every parent should get measuring cups and look what 1 cup of cereal is and see how many calories that is. So when both my kids are eaters and they are the healthiest eaters, but they are both always bouncing right between overweight and normal, overweight and normal. They love food. So I started to realize that if I was giving them a cereal that was full of carbs, the calories were so huge, whereas they would love to have some fruit in place of that second bowl of cereal. And so that's one of those things where your children should not see what you're doing because it could cause some eating disorders. But you should know what your athlete child needs for calories if it's double the amount that your non-athletic child needs. But it's true that children know how to self-regulate what they need. And as long as you provide a healthy balance, the really key to second portions is that they don't get second portions just of the rice and chicken. They start back with their second portion of their vegetable. They have to eat another portion of vegetable. If they're like, nah, then they weren't really hungry. And at 8 o'clock before my kids go to bed, it's the last call for carrots or cucumbers. That's it. If they are hungry, they will go through 2 bowls of carrots. And I was like, oh, they were hungry, but they're cleaning their teeth at the same time. And they're hydrating. So you do get to let them eat and to their heart's content. And try not to be restrictive, but eating the right foods and all food groups. So if they've gone through a lot of protein, go back to more vegetables or more fruit.
Wonderful. We've got just a couple minutes left, and I want to give you ample opportunity to shout out your website, your blog, and again, off screen, we talked a bit about some of the misinformation that can be spread by unaccredited sources. So if you'll touch on that for just 30, 60 seconds, have at it.
Thanks, David. I looked through the Fit Kids presentations and was impressed that you have quite a few doctors on there. And I think during the pandemic, people were turning to blogs that were doctors of computer science or doctors of other professions stating their opinions as a doctor. And I think if you can look and vet out your source of information, it makes a big difference, especially in this day and age when you don't have to pay for your information, you can get it anywhere. My website, AskDrVivi.com, I try to do regular blogs on fitness and health. I'm on social media, on Instagram, Ask Dr. Vivi, and Facebook, Ask Dr. Vivi. I love answering questions from the public. I have a very small practice, but my goal is to share information or help with misinformation by talking to parents directly, either through social media or my website.
Dr. Vivi, thanks so much for your time with us today. It's been wonderful, and I'm sure will be helpful to many, many families.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate talking with you, David.